Ready to witness the intriguing matches of Magnus Carlsen, where his undeniable talent was both his greatest strength and a potential Achilles heel? Today, we unravel this gripping chess encounters where Magnus Carlsen, the reigning champion, found himself facing opponents who cleverly exploited his reckless moves. You will see the delicate balance between supreme skill and the perils of hubris on the chessboard. These battles serve as a reminder that even the greatest champions are not immune to the pitfalls of complacency. Stay tuned until the end to explore the fascinating psychology behind Magnus's journey, as we analyze the penalties of his laxity and oversight, and how it influenced the results of these memorable games. Magnus vs. Alexander Morozov. This game was a thrilling clash on the chessboard, as Magnus Carlsen squares off against the formidable Alexander Morozov, a powerhouse ranked number 2 in the world at his peak. This game is no ordinary encounter. It's a showdown that displays the unrivaled skills of Morozov and proves he's not to be underestimated. As the clock starts ticking, Magnus kicks off the game with a strategic pawn move to c4, met by Alexander's cunning pawn advance to e6. The opening evolves into an intense English battle, with white's pawn on c4 and g3, and black's pawns holding firm on d5 and f6. Seizing the moment, Morozov captures Magnus's pawn on c4, prompting Magnus to swiftly deploy his bishop to g2 before safely castling his king. With Magnus having already fortified his position, Morozov finds himself with underdeveloped pieces. However, he maintains an edge with an extra pawn, defending it valiantly by placing his pawn on b5. Undeterred, Magnus strategizes, making a bold pawn thrust to a4, launching an attack on black's central pawns. The stakes couldn't be higher for Magnus, who yearns for victory with the white pieces. In a flurry of moves, Magnus orchestrates a calculated assault on Morozovic's king, sacrificing his rook for a knight. As pawns exchange hands, Magnus unveils a triple threat, targeting Alexander's vulnerable pawn on f7. Swiftly, Morozov mobilizes his queen to the defense. Magnus, undeterred, strikes the knight to g4, delivering a menacing blow. It's a critical moment where Morozov must treat carefully to stay in the game. Amidst the tactical maneuvers, Magnus unleashes the knight to f6, coercing a mass exchange of pieces. While Magnus aims to infiltrate Morozovic's defenses with his queen, it's a race against time. Morozov possesses a significant material advantage, needing only to liquidate the board to secure victory. In a gripping sequence of moves, Morozov pins Magnus's bishop to his king with the bishop to d5, leaving Magnus in a vulnerable position. As the game progresses, Morozov skillfully shelters his king in a corner, while menacingly threatening the checkmate by snatching the pawn on h4. Cornered and with no viable options, Magnus is left with no choice but to gracefully concede defeat. Magnus vs. Boris Savchenko. This is an interesting battle on the chessboard, as Boris Savchenko takes on the legendary Magnus Carlsen. You will witness how Magnus made one of the most disastrous mistakes ever done in the realm of chess. It all begins with Magnus confidently pushing his pawn to e4, met by Boris's crafty response with c5. As the initial moves unfold, the game evolves into a fierce Sicilian defense, with white's pawns stationed at c4 and e4, while black's pawns hold steady at c6 and f6. With both players castling into an evenly balanced position, it's at this stage that Magnus plots to gain an advantage over Boris. Initiating his scheme, Magnus positions his bishop to e3, setting the stage for a potential assault after pushing his pawn to f4. Yet, Boris remains undaunted, swiftly maneuvering his queen to a5, connecting his rooks along the back rank. As the players make subtle moves, unbeknownst to them, they're edging closer to a tumultuous clash. Magnus launches a swift attack with his pawn, prompting Boris to retreat his knight to safety. However, it's at this critical moment that Magnus commits a harrowing blunder. After contemplating his options, Magnus places his knight on d5, inadvertently leaving his pawn on a2 unguarded. Boris seizes the opportunity, swiftly capturing the pawn with his queen. Undeterred, Magnus presses on, executing strategic moves. With Boris's knight on f6, a blunder is made, allowing Magnus to pounce with the knight to c3, setting the stage for his pawn to conquer Boris's knight on the subsequent move. Recognizing the gravity of his mistake, Boris reluctantly surrenders his knight, granting Magnus the upper hand. Magnus now takes control of the game, skillfully maneuvering his pieces. As the bishops are traded and Magnus proposes a queen exchange, Boris is faced with a daunting decision. Engaging in an endgame against Magnus is an arduous task, yet Boris is left with no alternative but to succumb, accepting the pawn capture and allowing Magnus to position his bishop on b6. Sensing victory within his grasp, Magnus exploits Boris's weakness in endgames. Boris attempts to mount a defense by advancing his pawn to f5, but Magnus remains unfazed, strategically advancing his king. A series of pawn exchanges follows, with Boris inadvertently assisting Magnus in his quest for triumph. Magnus's pawn makes its way to h3. Boris draws closer with his king, aiming to consolidate his forces. While Magnus's position appears secure, Boris still possesses numerous threats. Boris makes a move positioning his rook on b3, seemingly offering Magnus a free rook in exchange. Little do they know that this tactical move sets the stage for a pawn promotion and a potential queen. Magnus refuses to succumb, redirecting his rook to d1, inadvertently giving Boris a free pawn. Both players find themselves in an equal position, leaving the outcome uncertain. Magnus proposes a trade of bishops, but Boris refuses, launching an attack on Magnus's knight. Magnus retreats his bishop under pressure, and after a minor scuffle, it finds a safe haven. As the tension escalates, Magnus's bishop becomes a target of Boris's relentless assault. However, before Boris can capture it, Magnus skillfully checks Boris's king, forcing a trade of rooks. A few more moves are played out before Boris's pawn advances to c3, a mere 2 squares away from queening. Magnus thwarts the attempt, and Boris defends his pawn with his bishop. Although Magnus holds a slight advantage, he must remain vigilant and play flawlessly. The pieces continue their intricate dance on the chessboard, with Magnus meticulously calculating his every move. Finally, seizing an opportunity, Magnus seizes Boris's pawn, leading to a trade-off of bishops and rooks. Magnus finds himself in a possession of a rook and 2 pawns, while Boris maintains a bishop and 4 pawns, including a formidable pass pawn with tremendous potential. Despite the balance, the game seems destined for a draw, unless one of them succumbs to a critical mistake. With their pieces shuffling in a delicate equilibrium, Magnus guides his king to d3, intending to protect his pawns from Boris's encroaching king. Unbeknownst to him, this seemingly innocent move will prove to be his ultimate downfall. Boris responds by maneuvering his bishop back to e1, and in a fateful moment, Magnus carelessly advances his king to d4, committing a grave blunder that will cost him the game. As Boris swiftly moves his bishop to check the exposed king, Magnus reacts by repositioning his king, only to realize the fatal consequences. A wave of realization washes over Magnus as he realizes his error, but it's too late. Boris points out the illegality of Magnus's move, leaving Magnus to grimace and stop the clock, acknowledging his defeat. While the victory was secured through an unfortunate illegal move, Boris emerges as the winning contestant. Magnus vs. Judith Polgar. This is another gripping encounter as Magnus Carlsen faces his match with the formidable Judith Polgar. The stage is set, and the game unfolds with Judith initiating her opening move, e4. Magnus swiftly responds with c4, opting for the Sicilian defense. As the pieces gradually find their places on the board, the tension mounts. With precision, Judith castles her king's queenside, setting the stage for a fierce battle. The knights dance, with their swords clashing in a symphony of strategic maneuvers. Magnus cunningly positions his bishop on b7, provoking Judith to dislodge her knight from its post. Unfazed, Magnus executes a clever tactic, seizing Judith's pawn on g4, exploiting the vulnerability of her rook. Bewildered, Judith searches for a response and swiftly drives away Magnus's knight with her rook. The game intensifies with each calculated move, and as Judith maneuvers her bishop to e4, Magnus's fate takes a perilous turn. In a fateful moment, Magnus makes a critical blunder, moving his rook to c8, a move filled with unforeseen consequences. Like a virtuoso, Judith pounces on the opportunity, swiftly placing her bishop on b6, poised to deliver a checkmate on d7 should Magnus capture the bishop. Magnus finds himself deep in contemplation, aware of the grim outcome that awaits him. After careful consideration, he reluctantly takes Judith's bishop, knowing that his chances have already dwindled. The tide turns against Magnus as he loses his queen, desperately attempting to salvage the situation with his knight. However, the mounting pressure becomes insoluble, forcing Magnus to concede defeat. A mere 90 moves into the game, Judith Polgar proves to be an invincible force, showcasing her prowess as a worthy opponent for Magnus Carlsen. Magnus versus a challenger. This is an extraordinary chess encounter that defies all expectations. Magnus Carlsen, renowned for his mastery of the game, finds himself facing off against an unexpected opponent, a chess enthusiast who challenges him in a Norwegian bar. Little do they know that this seemingly casual game will etch itself into the annals of chess history as one of the most stunning battles ever witnessed. With the white pieces, Magnus wastes no time, unleashing a blistering e4 to kickstart the game. His opponent swiftly responds with e5, catapulting the game into the familiar territory of the Roy Lopez opening, where knights harmoniously align and c3 takes the stage. Both players exhibit a solid start, displaying their knowledge and skill. However, a pivotal moment arises when Magnus's opponent, whom we shall call A, commits a crucial blunder with knight g6, unwittingly relinquishing control of the center to Magnus. The atmosphere in the bar is charged, as Magnus exudes unwavering confidence, while A ponders each move, contemplating his strategy. This divergence in mindset will significantly impact the result of this encounter. With a slight advantage and an impending assault on the king's side, Magnus positions his pieces strategically, targeting A's knight with a menacing bishop c2. His pieces dance with purpose, while A's position begins to crumble under the mounting pressure. Magnus senses victory looming as he sets the trap to ensnare A's bishop, a fatal blow that could swiftly seal the game in his favor. Realizing the gravity of his mistake, A finds himself at a crossroads. Magnus relentlessly attacks his knight, coercing a defensive move. Yet, A hesitates, knowing that the subsequent pawn attack could result in the loss of valuable piece. Eventually, surrendering to the inevitable, A sacrifices his bishop, succumbing to Magnus's tactical brilliance. However, even the indomitable Magnus Carlsen is not immune to lapses in focus. A tinge of carelessness creeps into his play, reflected in his choice of queen h5, an attacking move that fails to threaten checkmate. A seizes the opportunity, retaliating with g7, and rekindling hope amidst the mounting tension. A senses the gravity of the situation, cautiously maneuvering his rook away from imminent danger. Under the mounting pressure, A summons every ounce of resilience, determined to cling to his position. Miraculously, fate intervenes. Magnus, in a stunning turn of events, makes a grave error with knight f5, inadvertently granting A a free pawn while subjecting his queen to intense pressure. Magnus instinctively attempts to capture the knight, only to realize his catastrophic blunder. In a stunning twist, he inadvertently falls into the same trap he had once exploited. With a heavy heart, Magnus Carlsen concedes defeat, his visage reflecting disappointment. The rapid pace of his moves and unshakable confidence throughout the game had led him astray, impulsively capturing a piece. Thank you for watching this video. As you witnessed, these games displayed the complex nature of chess, where victory and defeat often hanged in a delicate thread. What are your thoughts on Magnus Carlsen's performance? Did his opponent's skill level surprise you? Which game left the deepest impression on you, and why? Perhaps you have your own theories about Magnus' strategies or the psychological dynamics at play during these battles. Share your insightful thoughts and analysis down below.